Something has shifted inside Buckingham Palace. Prince William revealed details about Lady Louise Windsor's inheritance, not accidentally, but deliberately, and the moment he did, Camilla's carefully constructed position inside the monarchy began to look significantly more fragile than anyone had publicly acknowledged. I've spent years investigating the inner workings of this institution. I've spoken to sources, reviewed documents, traced the money and the power. And what I can tell you is this. This is not simply a story about a young woman receiving a bequest. This is about who controls the future of the Crown's wealth, who gets to shape the next chapter of this monarchy, and who, very quietly, is being pushed to the margins. Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly what William revealed, why he revealed it, what Lady Louise stands to inherit, and why that number alarmed people inside the palace. But then, I'm going to show you something the headlines missed entirely. Camilla responded, not publicly, not with a statement, not with a carefully worded press release from Clarence House, but she responded, and sources close to the palace have told me the nature of that response reveals everything about where the real tension inside this family currently sits. This is not ordinary times for the British monarchy, and what is happening right now, behind those palace walls, is more significant than most people realise. But before we get to Camilla's response, you need to understand something about Lady Louise Windsor that the mainstream coverage consistently gets wrong. She was never the peripheral royal figure the press painted her as. From the moment Edward and Sophie made the deliberate and frankly remarkable decision not to give their children royal HRH titles, Louise has been positioned differently to every other young royal of her generation. Think about what that decision actually meant. It meant freedom from the suffocating machinery of royal protocol. It meant a childhood and an education shielded from the kind of scrutiny that has visibly damaged other members of this family. But it also meant something else, something financial, something strategic, and something that is only now becoming fully understood by those watching this family closely. Edward and Sophie were not simply being modest when they declined the titles. They were building something. Louise attended St Andrews, the same university where William met Catherine. She is academically sharp, privately ambitious, and by all accounts genuinely close to the late Queen Elizabeth in a way that went far beyond ceremonial appearances. Sources have told me that in the final years of the Queen's life, Louise spent considerable private time with her grandmother at Windsor. Not for photographs, not for public engagements, but in genuine, sustained, private company. And the Queen, who was always precise about intention when it came to her estate, noticed. She took note of Louise's discretion, her composure, and her lack of appetite for the kind of public drama that had come to define so many other branches of the family. That observation had consequences, financial consequences, significant ones. Here is where the story becomes considerably more complicated. The details of Lady Louise's inheritance were not supposed to enter public conversation. That is the first thing you need to understand. The late Queen's estate, its full scope, its distribution, its specific bequests, remains one of the most protected pieces of financial information attached to the British Crown. Royal wills are sealed by the courts. That is not accidental. It is structural. It is deliberate. It is institutional protection of the highest order. But information moves, particularly inside a family where competing interests are sharpening, where alliances are shifting, and where the next generation of power is actively being contested. What I have been able to piece together through conversations with sources connected to both the Windsor and Mountbatten-Windsor inner circles is that Louise received a bequest from the Queen that went significantly beyond the symbolic. We are not talking about jewellery, though there were pieces of considerable value included. We are talking about assets, about property considerations, about a financial acknowledgement from the Queen that positioned Louise, quietly, deliberately, as someone the monarch regarded with particular trust and particular affection. Now, why did William surface this? Because William does not do anything without calculation. I have watched this man navigate institutional politics for 2 decades, and the one thing I can tell you with absolute confidence is that when William allows information to move, it is because he has decided it serves a purpose. The timing of this revelation, coming at a moment when Camilla's influence inside the palace is being openly questioned, was not coincidental. It was strategic, and Camilla understood that immediately. Let's be precise about what Camilla's position inside this monarchy actually looks like right now. She is queen. But then, and this is the part that rarely gets examined honestly, being queen consort in title does not automatically translate into being secure in influence. Camilla has spent years constructing a careful public rehabilitation. From the most hated woman in Britain to a queen with respectable approval ratings, that journey required discipline, patience, and an almost forensic management of public perception. But inside the palace, the picture is more complicated. Camilla has 2 children from her first marriage, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopez. Neither holds a royal title. Neither is part of the working royal family. But both, according to sources I have spoken with, had expectations. Private expectations, carefully managed, never spoken about publicly. Expectations about what their mother's position might eventually mean for them, financially, institutionally, in terms of access and proximity to the estate of the crown. And then the details of Louise's inheritance surfaced, and those expectations collided with a reality that nobody in Camilla's circle had fully anticipated. The Queen, William and Harry's grandmother, not Camilla's ally, had made her own decisions about where her trust and her estate was directed, and Louise featured in those decisions in a way that Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopez did not. Sources close to the situation have described Camilla's private response as one of barely concealed fury. Not grief, not surprise, fury. Because this was not just about money, it was about signal. It was about what the late Queen had communicated, quietly, legally, permanently, about who she trusted with the future of this family. But then the story moves somewhere even more revealing, because Camilla's reaction to Louise's inheritance is not happening in isolation. It is happening inside a broader, escalating tension between Camilla and William that has been building since before Charles's coronation, and that very few people inside the royal press corps are willing to name directly. I will name it. William does not trust Camilla. He has never fully trusted her. And the inheritance revelation gave him something extraordinarily useful, a legitimate, documentable, unchallengeable demonstration that the late Queen's own instincts aligned more closely with his branch of the family than with the one Camilla represents. Think about what that means symbolically. The Queen, the ultimate institutional authority, had looked at Louise and seen something worth investing in. That is a signal, a permanent one. Charles, as ever, sits uncomfortably in the centre of this. My sources describe him as a man who genuinely loves his wife, but who is also acutely aware that his legacy depends almost entirely on his relationship with William remaining functional. He cannot afford to take sides. But not taking sides in a situation this charged is itself a choice, and William reads it as one. The palace machinery is also shifting. Senior advisors who were once closely aligned with Camilla's office have in recent months been quietly repositioned. Meetings that once included Camilla's team have begun to happen without them. These are small signals, institutional signals, but I have been watching this family long enough to know that small signals inside Buckingham Palace are never small. They are the palace's language, and right now that language is telling a very clear story about who is ascending and who is not. So where does all of this leave the monarchy? Lady Louise Windsor is 20 years old, but then consider what she represents in this moment, not just as a person, but as a symbol of a particular vision for what the crown could become. Edward and Sophie raised her to be capable without being performative, serious without being stiff, royal in substance, if not always in ceremony. And William, who is building his own vision for a slimmed-down, modernized monarchy, has quietly begun to signal that Louise has a role to play in that vision. She has taken on engagements, carefully chosen ones. She has represented the family at moments that required discretion and composure rather than celebrity. And she has done so without incident, without controversy, and without the kind of press management crisis that has characterized so many other royal appearances in recent years. The inheritance, in this context, is not just financial. It is the late Queen passing a baton, and William has made sure that people inside the institution understand who caught it. For Camilla, this creates a problem that title and position cannot entirely solve. The emotional and institutional geography of this family is being redrawn, and the lines being drawn do not run through Clarence House. They run through Kensington Palace, through Windsor, and through a young woman who spent her grandmother's final years simply being present, being trusted, and being quietly prepared for something larger than anyone has yet announced. The question now is not whether Louise will have a significant role in the future of this monarchy. The question is how much that role will cost Camilla, and whether Charles has either the will or the ability to stop it. Now, I want to know what you think. Was William right to surface these inheritance details, or was it a calculated act of aggression toward Camilla? And do you believe Louise is being deliberately positioned as the monarchy's next key figure? Leave your thoughts below.